Hi everyone, this is Lana Yelenyev, chairperson of the Neurodiversity Foundation, and I am here with Siobhan Lam. I was blown away in our conversation, our last conversation, Siobhan, and not only in terms of your wealth of experience and understanding about neurodiversity, but also your experiences as well. So as a neurodiversity advocate, writer, speaker, educator, tell us something more about you, and thank you again for saying yes to this interview for Neurodiversity Pride Day.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely. So I am now a neurodiversity advocate, but it's a new field for me. Before I've taught school for about 20 plus years and am now moving into the field of neurodiversity advocation. Just a bit of background about myself. So I'm neurodivergent myself, so is my husband, and so are my 3 children. I really struggled going through the school system, but my mum was always there to support me. And even though my children struggle, I've always been there to support them. So I never really thought about being an advocate. But then I moved to Singapore for a little while, and I saw how many neurodivergent kids fall through the cracks because their parents adore them, but just don't know how to support them and don't know what to do. And so that's when I decided I wanted to be an advocate to help all of the neurodivergent kids, just like my own and just like me, that are falling through the cracks. So that's what I do now. I have 3 children, so a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and they've got any number of things from autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia.
Wow.
So I'm used to a variety of things.
So many strengths in there. so much strength in there.
When I taught in Australia, I taught mainly chemistry and maths. So I taught mainly gifted kids. And then in Singapore, I taught at a school for neurodivergent kids. So I really looked at kids that were not my own, that were neurodivergent, and how to help them. And how to help them through my own story and my kids' stories.
And what better way to be able to connect that both worlds, right? Because you have your own experience as a a neurodivergent individual, and then you have also experiences with your children. So what better way to also see that within the school setting, And this is this first question about looking at the field of education. What would you say is the state of neurodivergent individuals right now, especially in the school setting? What would you say is the current state of students?
One thing that's interesting is when I was a child myself, I think there was more acceptance of difference than there is now. So we're moving through this continuum at the moment where people are learning more and more about neurodivergence, but they don't know enough yet. But the acceptance of difference has actually decreased, not increased.
Oh, wow.
So when I was a child and I was different, teachers saw me as an individual and as being different. Whereas I think now, in my experience, a lot of labels are used and put on kids without a true understanding of what that diagnosis means for that individual.
And I can imagine this is where the challenges that they're facing right now. I mean, given that awareness is there, but the deeper understanding of what is needed is still not mainstream. So given this, given the students that you've seen, how are they within tackling adversity, especially in the school setting? What are the experiences that you've seen with students, right, when it comes to being challenged by adversity?
So firstly, I believe your ability to cope with adversity, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, comes from a bedrock of understanding and love. or a cliched word. So the more you feel understood, the more you feel heard, the more you feel that you matter, the more you will cope with adversity. The problem with kids at the moment is that even though teachers want to understand and schools want to understand, the level of understanding of neurodivergence isn't there yet. So a lot of schools and teachers see these kids through a deficit lens, through a medical model. So they see what they can't do, not what they can do. And it isn't until schools and teachers truly understand neurodivergence and start seeing every individual, especially neurodivergent individuals, through a strength-based lens, what they're good at, what strengths they can use, what strengths they can leverage on to help them with their struggles. And until the neurodivergent kids feel understood and feel that teachers are seeing them for their strengths and not their deficits, they will struggle with adversity because they can't draw on that bedrock of understanding and safety.
Siobhan, thank you for sharing this lens on, having a bedrock of love and compassion. And I personally know that, having a gifted child, there has been situations where people would just dismiss it as, oh, your kid is quick, it's not a problem at all. And then when you share about, oh, but they do also have high sensitivities, and this is something that needs a lot of love and compassion, and not just to be able to dismiss it as, oh, you can do this, oh, this is easy for you. And I've seen this also within the school setting where my kids, my son went to, with all the other gifted kids that are in the class. And that bedrock of love and compassion, if that is not within the school setting, it's so quick to dismiss them as, oh, don't overreact too much, or I know you can do it, so just do it. That setting aside of emotions, of ways that they're looking at the world. So this is my first-hand experience, and I've seen that also with my son when he's tackling things that he's challenged with, that taking it out from not just that, oh, I'm feeling frustrated with this, but also showing him his strengths has really shifted that. So thank you for sharing, and perhaps this is also a good way to look at what do you think are the ways that neurodivergent students will be able to tackle adversity in the classroom? What are simple strategies or activities or tips that you've done in the classroom or you've shared with other parents?
So I find it very hard to make a list that teachers can just tick off, because at the end of the day, it's about every individual student. But the thing I think every teacher needs to do is truly understand what makes that student tick, what makes that student flow, what gives them energy, what makes them smile, what saps their energy. And then you need to work out an environment. What environments make this child do well? What environments work to this child's strengths? What environments work to their struggles? Which environments will they struggle the most in? And then we need to work out how for each individual we can put them in their strength environment more often than not. And when they do need to be in the environment that challenges them, make sure that we have all the supports necessary for them there. And that is how we can tackle adversity and these kids coping with adversities. We can make sure that they are in an environment that suits them as often as possible and provide supports when they're in an environment that does not support them.
I love that. And it's so easy to think of, what's the energy that the child is bringing in, what's the environment that best fits their strengths. And then how can we engage them in their strengths environment? And
yes, and really work on their strengths and not punishing them. So one of the things that happen far too often in Australia is that you'll have a kid with ADHD that can't sit still and they're moving too much. The teacher thinks they're being naughty. So what does the teacher do? She punishes the child by keeping them in at recess. But she's doing the exact opposite she needs to do. And you have to explain to the teacher that you can't punish someone for something that is them. Punishment and consequences work for purposeful behavior. But when the behavior is actually because it's intrinsic in them and they can't control it, you can't punish them for that. And what they have done is they've taken away the ability for the kid to self-regulate. So when I teach workshops, I say to teachers, when I have a kid that can't sit still and can't regulate, I give them a way of regulating. So I'll say to them, oh, look, Miss Brown really needs this piece of paper. Can you run it to her as fast as you can and then come back to me? So it gives them, he or she, an avenue to regulate so that they can come back and be calmer because they've been allowed to regulate.
And this, I think, is very important, having that agency of, I can control myself, my environment, have a way to decide for myself as well. I think this is definitely something
Sorry. I was just going to say, you've hit on one of the most important points I make to teachers, which is children as young as 10, if not younger, need to be in their own meetings. If the meeting is about them, they need to be there. They need to have, they need autonomy, and they need some responsibility and ownership of the goals that are being set and how they're going to reach them. And I actually get my son to sign the goal sheet. And when he hasn't done what we've asked him to do, I show it to him and say, you signed this. They need to have ownership. The autistic community have a saying, nothing about us without us. And this is exactly how we should view all neurodivergent children and adults. They need to be the centre of the decisions about them. They cannot be made for them. They have to be made with them.
And I would love to also get it in the lens of parents, of how can we be best advocates then for our neurodivergent children? What do you think, are necessary steps that parents need to, at the get-go, do or, settle also within themselves? Because I can imagine, that for a lot of parents, if you're neurodivergent, it also brings up a lot of, the things that you've gone through, you wouldn't want for your child, so there also brings up some hurtful memories or trauma. What do you think our parents with neurodivergent children need to do for themselves so that they can be best advocates for their child?
So firstly, I believe that parents are parents. They are not teachers, they are parents. So that relationship with your child, that parent-child relationship, should not be compromised in the name of homework or in the name of academic success. So as soon as a parent starts yelling at their child to do their homework, I say, step away. You are invading your relationship, and then that's going to make it much harder to move forward. So you need to understand you are a parent. Secondly, you need to work as a team with the school. So when we have meetings about my students or about my son, we have the teachers there, the parents there, the child themselves, and anybody else the parents want to be there. So for my son, we have his psychologist and his speech therapist. Together, we work as a team. We move forward. You need to make sure everyone's on the same page. As soon as a parent and a school, or a parent and a teacher, ends up in an us and them argument, leave the school. It's not going to work, especially for our children. We need to be together. We need in the same direction, moving in the same way. What's happening at home needs to happen at school. The other thing parents need is to be kind to themselves. Don't hit themselves. Don't compare their children to other people's kids. Their children are theirs. It's a little child, all of theirs, with their own autonomy. Don't compare them. Don't compare their growth or their development. I often will say, especially to parents whose kids are not doing well at school, compare what your child could do last year compared to what they can do this year.
Yeah.
Don't compare where they were in the year group last year to this year.
Yeah.
Because see, your child is always improving. Always improving. Whereas if you say they came 13th last year and they've come 13th this year, it may seem to you and the child that they're not improving. But they are. It's just that all the other kids are also improving. So compare what they can do. And if you have a child with a low self-efficacy, compare more often than not. So when my son was really struggling with his self-efficacy, I would sit down with him twice a term and say, look what you can do now that you couldn't do at the beginning of the term. Isn't this amazing? You've done so awesomely. Constantly highlight what can be done today, couldn't be done yesterday.
The surfacing of strength
also,
is very important.
Yes, that surfacing of strengths. And then parents need to also be kind to teachers. These kids, including myself, they're difficult kids sometimes. It's difficult to know what works. You can work it out. I mean, I had a parent once say to me a couple of years ago, they were having a hard time with their child. And they said, but I thought it was all working. Everything was going so well. It was said, it was done. So what are you talking about? This can change on the turn of a dime. You're constantly needing, your child can change direction instantly. So be kind to the teachers as well, that they are trying. We're all in the same boat, and this boat is trying to help your child. And all we've got one goal, which is to help your child.
It brings me back to what you said about having a bedrock of love and compassion. You know, so from all angles, from parents, from teachers, to children themselves. So given this, you know, given what you've seen, what you've experienced as a parent, as an educator, what are the best opportunities for growth that you would say neurodivergent, students have right now? What can be opportunities for growth for them?
You see, this is a very hard question because, again, it's about the individual. I mean, if you generalize, you can say a lot of ADHD kids have a lot of energy. A lot of dyslexic kids are unbelievably creative. So if I had a child that I didn't know and they were dyslexic, I would start to look for strengths of artistic nature or creativity. But it might not be there with one individual. But really the area of growth that's the biggest is just working out what the strengths are and capitalizing on those. Don't look at ticking boxes. Don't look at, well, every child has to get a B in every subject. Forget about that. Your child is unique. They are special. It is actually better for success. Look at all the successful people around us to be unique and the best person at one thing and not so good at other things. Yeah. So one thing I do with students and my kids is I would like them to spend 75% of time in what their strengths are, 75% of the time in what they like doing, and only do remediation for their struggles for 25% of the time. Because I do not want their struggles defining them. I want their strengths to define them. I want them to say, which students say, I rock. I mean, I may have trouble writing, but I actually am really smart at some things. That's what I want. I want their strengths to define them, not their struggles.
So beautiful words. I know that those who would be watching this, this interview would definitely take in a lot of insights from this very short conversation. So I'm hoping that we can have further conversations on this, Siobhan. Your lens definitely is very much needed And this is also the reason why we have the Neurodiversity Education Academy, to bring out these different voices and different lenses that that we need to surface. Because yeah, what we know as mainstream is what, you know, people consider as normal, where in fact there's so many things that we can learn from each other. And what you just said, you know, about letting their strengths define them, that's just such a big battle cry, you know, for not just neurodivergent individuals, for everyone, right? This is just what we would want, for ourselves. So thank you for sharing that lens. If, you know, if I'm gonna pick two things that I took out from this interview, it would really be that bedrock of love and compassion, and letting our strengths define, you know, ourselves. And thank you for that. So would you want to share something about any work that you have upcoming, or how people can get in touch with you if they want to know more about your services or the things that you're doing?
So I'm in Australia, so nowhere near the Netherlands. I'd love to go there one day. So at the moment, I'm an advocate for parents that are struggling to advocate for their own children at schools. So they can call me and I will help them, either just help the parents so that they can advocate for themselves and know which path would be best for their child, or I can go into the school and help them advocate in the school. I would usually like to do the first, not the latter, only because if you haven't had an advocate in a room, sometimes schools consider that quite a confrontational thing, almost like taking in a lawyer.
It can be daunting for them, yeah.
I also speak to parents about accepting and seeing their child through a strength-based lens straight after diagnosis. Parents, I must say, my husband and I didn't struggle as much, but we're neurodivergent ourselves. We're very successful. We see that you can be very successful. Whereas a lot of parents ask me questions when their kids are first diagnosed of, will they ever have a job? Of course they'll have a job. Will they be able to get married? If they want to, yes, as much as anybody else will be. And they're just full of all these concerns because they don't understand neurodivergence. Yeah. And that's, I really just want our community and our kids to be accepted and embraced. Because in Singapore, something that I did was I mentored a group of 20 to 30-year-old autistics. And what I found really sad was that they didn't embrace themselves and they didn't accept themselves. And it was because they hadn't been embraced, they didn't have that bedrock from their childhood. And I believe if we can help parents and help schools give that bedrock of understanding and compassion during childhood, we'll have much more successful neurodivergent adults that can give to society, because we have a lot to give that neurotypicals don't, that can give to society, rather than feeling like they don't have that power.
Thank you for that. Definitely advocacy is very, very, very important. So we are glad that you are doing this work, this very valuable work. And we would be adding in links to how to get in touch with you in the, you know, in the platform. So Siobhan, thank you again for joining us for this year's Neurodiversity Pride Day, and we're looking forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you so much. Bye.